Let's do this. Wow. Hello.
Hey,
hello.
we're here. Yeah.
Get ready for lots of loves. Welcome to the For Monday podcast.
What's going on, everybody?
It's here. So
We're
glad
s-
you all are tuning in with us.
We're super excited. And I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous.
I might throw up a little.
A little bit.
That's okay.
That would make
It'll be
for
fun.
a very memorable first For Monday
Let's do it.
podcast if you threw up live here on YouTube. But yeah, we have these cool sound effects here that, I got to use it. So it's like we got,
Oh, gosh, here we go.
whenever Jenna makes a brilliant point, we'll do that. And then, when I make
There
a
you go.
really bad joke,
We'll probably use that one the most.
we'll probably use that a lot. But hey, if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook right now,
Welcome.
yeah, we just want to say
For
welcome.
Monday podcast. So what is the For Monday podcast all about?
Yeah, For Monday podcast, really, it's this experiment that we're doing here at Canvas. We're really wanting to take the conversations we're happening on Sunday and we want to bring them into the rest of our week. And we want to create a space for deeper conversation and more application into our lives and even some collaboration. Come on now,
Love
those
it.
three: application, conversation, collaboration. Yeah, we're hoping to create a space for those three things and then just some random nonsense along the way. I'm sure once the NBA season picks up, I will be talking about the Warriors winning and you'll be talking about the Suns losing,
Wow.
So it'll,
Wow.
yeah. So
Might need a
tough crowd.
We're gonna need to take these buttons
Yeah,
away from you.
But hey, if you are watching right now, which I see 6 of you are watching, what up? We got 6 of you here. We got the one and only Eric Velez. What up?
Wow,
Giving
you
us
can tell.
some love. I know, right? Isn't
Aw,
that so
thanks,
cool?
Eric.
So thanks for those emojis. And then there's Jesse saying elbow cough, elbow cough, elbow cough. Is that what that means? Oh, okay, cool. Well, thanks, Jesse, for those deep and insightful thoughts here on our
Oh,
For Monday
gosh.
podcast.
Well, for all 6 of you that are here right now, make sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any notifications about the For Monday podcast. And if you want to watch it again later, you can watch it wherever you get your podcasts.
Spotify.
Apple Podcasts. That's what I do.
Apple, Napster.
What's Napster?
Is that still a thing?
I
You
don't
don't
know.
even remember what that is?
I have paper here. Do you think I know what technology?
I don't know.
is
Did
right
any of
now?
you listening, did any of you watch or use Napster to pirate music back in the day? Let us know in the comments. And we'll maybe put your comment on the screen because we just think that's really cool. Speaking of comments on the screen, Jenna, your grandma has joined.
Oh, Grandma, I love you.
Hey, Grandma.
Thanks for being here.
We are so glad that you are here with us as well.
Oh, that makes my heart happy. I feel better. Okay, I'm not nervous.
Oh yeah, Eric said LimeWire. Yeah, LimeWire. Do you know what
I
LimeWire
have
is?
no idea what LimeWire is.
You never stole music as a kid. Clearly,
I don't know.
you're just such a good Christian girl.
Okay.
You just listened to Michael W. Smith, and
I was never
went to Berean Christian
I
bookstores.
liked Plus One. They were like
Plus
a
One,
Christian
terrible,
boy band.
terrible. All right. Well, yeah. So we're really excited about the For Monday podcast and creating this space for all of you, hopefully to enjoy, to grow from, and to join with us in the conversation. And so hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Instagram. We're even on TikTok now. Come on, somebody.
I've never even downloaded TikTok.
Yeah, I'll be honest. TikTok intimidates me. So if you're a TikTok pro, let us know. Reach out because I am clueless. But hey, you can follow us on TikTok nonetheless, and we'll put some really good content out there for you as well as Twitter. So follow us on all of the things, but why don't we jump into this thing?
Let's do it.
We started a teaching series yesterday that you and I have been talking about, praying about, thinking about for some time, called
now.
Future Church. I mean, I think for many of us over the last couple of years, we've been wrestling with the future, mostly just not knowing what the future actually looks like. If you know what I'm talking about, give me like an amen in the comments. Like the last couple of years has probably thrown everything we thought was going to happen in the future up in the air. And it's, that's exciting at times because then you get to try new things, and then it's terrifying at other times. I'm sure all of us have felt both of those emotions and a lot of other emotions in between. But this series, Future Church, is really a culmination of a long time of thinking and praying about what does the future of the church look like on the other side of COVID. I mentioned yesterday during our Sunday teaching, and if you missed that teaching, you can always go to our YouTube and watch the full teaching there. But I mentioned that one of the things I was really struggling with, and you remember this, Jenna, I mean, we both struggled with this, especially on the other side of reopening Canvas. A lot of times people ask me, what was harder, navigating COVID when we were all shut down, or reopening the church, when things started to open up again? And by far, I don't know about you, but for me, I would say it was reopening this past year has been way harder than navigating all the isolation and lockdowns of COVID itself. Would you say the same thing, or was it different?
Surprisingly, yes. I feel like right when we reopened, it was more exciting because, gosh, how many weeks were we closed? 50.
It was like 60 weeks. It was a long time.
Weeks. After 60 weeks, finally reopening, it was exciting. But as the excitement kind of wore and we got into a groove, it definitely was harder, which really took me by surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there was, a big part of me, at least, that was hopeful that when we reopened, that we were just going to rebuild what was. Like, we knew a lot had changed because so many people had moved out of San Francisco. Like, we were aware of that reality. But I think there was a part of us, at least for me, that I was like really hoping, okay, let's go and rebuild what we were before COVID, because before COVID, God was doing amazing things. We were seeing great growth. It was so exciting. And we're just like, how do we go back to that place? And that wasn't happening. Yeah. And honestly, still hasn't happened. Yeah. And I really struggled with this. If you're a pastor listening, I know you could probably empathize with this on some level. Like, I really, really had some dark, not just nights of the soul, like dark weeks and months of the soul, where I just was very depressed and angry and frustrated that we were not rebuilding where we were. And I felt like God interrupted me in my, kind of pity party. I think I was throwing myself and just saying, hey, Travis, like, what if I'm not trying to rebuild what was, but what if I'm actually inviting you to build something entirely new? And, I had been so focused looking to the past that I had forgotten about the future. Yeah. And I wasn't stepping into the future. And as a result, I was stuck. And maybe some of you can relate to that on, even if you're not a pastor, you relate, you're looking backwards so much that you can't ever really like move forward. And so I felt that as a pastor trying to lead this church. And I realized, you know what? I need to stop focusing on the past. I need to start focusing on the future. Yeah. I can't recreate the past, but I can build the future. And so that's where this series, Future Church, really began to be birthed in my heart. And we're asking this question in this series, that kind of the heartbeat of the series revolves around this question. That is, what does it look like to build a future church that is worth passing on to the future generation? And
that is such a powerful question. I don't know for you, but like the first thing I think of is all the faces in Canvas Kids that I check in every single week.
Yeah.
Like, that is the future church. What are we doing now to pass on to them?
Yeah. It's crazy when you're a parent. Like, all of a sudden, when you have a child, you start thinking about the future in ways you never did before. And you think about the world that they're going to be, that they're going to take on at some point. And you realize, man, I want to give to my child a better world than the one I had.
Absolutely.
And I think that relates to the church as well. I think that's a large part of this series, going like, how can we give to the future generation a church that we didn't have but always wanted? Yeah. How can we give to the future generation a church that makes sense for the world that they're in? Yeah. And so that's what Future Church is really all about. So, I said it yesterday, and I kind of say it in jest, but I actually do mean it, is that if you think the church is just awesome and perfect and doesn't need any change, and you're like, man, I hope the church never evolves beyond where it is right now, then Future Church really is not a conversation or series that will interest you much. But if you have looked at the church over the last couple of years and been disappointed with it, maybe you've even been embarrassed by the church. Maybe you've even been like nervous to tell other people you are a follower of Jesus because of all the baggage that might be associated with that declaration. And you're going, gosh, we've got to do better.
Yeah.
The church has got to be better. It's got to be better than this. And that's what really Future Church is all about. Yeah. And so yesterday really was about us having beginning this series of conversations by having a very honest talk about what's happening in the church and what's happening in the world. And by no means, do we know everything that's going on and do we have the answers for everything? We're not posturing ourselves as the people who have all the answers. We absolutely don't. We have far more questions than answers. But we did look at 3 trends that I think if you want to build a future church that's for the future generation, these are 3 trends we really have to be honest about and we have to pay attention to and we got to get ready for. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if you didn't listen to yesterday's and you're getting ready to hear these 3 trends for the first time, grab a blanket, a comfort item, some comfort food. I wish I would have had that yesterday.
Yeah. No, I mean, these 3 trends aren't necessarily things that you're going to hear and be like, man, I just like, woo, I feel so good. Like it makes me smile.
Important.
It's so important.
Yeah.
It's so important. I mean, we just got to be honest about it.
Yeah.
Because we can hide from it, we can ignore it and pretend it's not happening, or we can just embrace this is the reality. So what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah.
And that's like my love. I'm an Enneagram 8, so it's like challenge. Yes, a hill. Let's climb it.
My Enneagram 9 over here is like, no.
Yeah, Jen is
Let me go take a nap.
For those who don't know what Enneagram is, Enneagram 8 is the challenger. Jenna is the peacemaker. So you can imagine our fights at home are quite interesting, right? Yeah, we do balance each other. That's another conversation. Okay, but here's the 3 trends. The 3 trends that I think we, as part of those who want to build a future church worth passing on to the future generation, 3 trends that we need to be aware of. All right, the first trend is this. If you're taking notes or wherever you are right now, maybe just write this down. That was such like a preachery thing. If you're taking notes, oh my gosh, this is such a different medium. Anyways, first trend is this. Cultural Christianity in America is a thing of the past. It's the first trend. I told you it wasn't going to sound like really great news, but we got to embrace this. Cultural Christianity. And what I mean by that is where Christianity and the ethics and teachings and values of Christianity are sort of seen as the cultural norm. That it is the frame in which we are viewing our ethics and making decisions through and creating culture and all that through. Like the day where America is a quote unquote Christian nation, that's another conversation. But that day, of American history is a thing of the past. Now, some will say we're not officially in a post-Christian country, that we're not officially post-Christian. While some would say we're not there yet, I don't know of anyone who would say that we're not headed there. And we live in San Francisco, and so we really feel this, right? Like San Francisco is very much a post-Christian city. Do you remember when we were looking for an apartment when we first moved here?
Oh man, whenever people found out we were pastors,
it was over. Bye. It was over. Like usually they would just like walk away.
We'd be like, well, not getting that apartment.
That's just San Francisco. We're in Arizona. If I'm like, I'm a pastor, people are like, what a fantastic way to, live your life. I'm going to go check it. It's just such a different animal. But here in San Francisco, it's a post-Christian city. And, there's a strong case to be made that cultural Christianity, not just in San Francisco, but in America, is a thing of the past, and we need to pay attention to it. Number 2 is this, that church attendance was declining before COVID, right? Church attendance was declining before COVID. And, I've heard before people say, well, COVID has really caused a decline in the church. Not really. I think it just expedited a decline that was already happening. In fact, over the past 20 years, every single generation, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, in every generational category, there has been a decline in engagement and attendance in the local church. And that's been happening since the year 2000. So over 20 years. So COVID, I think, just took that trajectory we were on and expedited, crammed about 10 years of change into a couple. And that is where we're at now. Church attendance was declining before COVID, and it is still declining. Third trend that we need to pay attention to is online community and digital engagement is here to stay. And I think we're just getting started.
Yeah. I mean, look at this.
Yeah. I mean,
Right
yeah,
now.
absolutely. I mean, I think, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, live video podcasts, most churches aren't doing that now. 10 years ago, no one was really, or very, very few were doing it. But we've seen so much. Who would have guessed that even 5 years ago that, one of the biggest trends in America would be people dancing on TikTok, that would get millions of views. And yet here we are. So online community, though, finding community online, whether it be through blogs, vlogs, through Facebook groups, through podcasts, you name it, it is here to stay. And I think it's only getting started. So those are 3 trends. I'm sure that we could add more to that, but I'd be curious, Jenna, just as you hear those 3, what stood out to you? Which one stood out to you? Which one was maybe the hardest to hear? And those of you that are listening, we'd love to hear from you as well. Which of those 3 trends maybe stood out to you that you agreed with or disagreed with or were surprised by or not surprised by? Yeah. Let us know in the comments.
Well, I think none of them were like shocking, but I think the one that really made me get squirrely, I guess you'd say, or pause. I like squirrely. Was the last one. Online community and digital engagement is here to stay.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, look you're the one with the iPad, but I've got like my paper.
What is that?
I like paper.
Where do you get that?
I have a paper Bible up here. That's crazy. So I think my initial reaction when I hear online community and digital engagement is here to say is, we're never going to see people again. I'm never going to be in the same room as people. We're never going to have a worship service together. Those are my initial thoughts when we started talking about this, however long ago. And it really kind of freaked me out, honestly, because I want to be with people. And what's funny is I feel like as we talked and dive more into this point, we're not saying either or, it's both and.
Yeah, I think that's huge, right?
You know?
Yeah, we're not saying it's either online community or offline community. I think sometimes people think it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
It's one or the other, but why can't it be both?
Yeah.
Why can't it be both? And we talked a little bit yesterday about how, even those who are like, refuse to believe that technology is going to have this big of a place in our lives. It already has a big place in our lives,
when you
right?
went through the list yesterday of like, hey, how do we get our food? Like Amazon Fresh. How do we buy things? Amazon. How do we go to a restaurant? I go to Yelp first.
Right.
How do all you single people date? You use an app. Like when we were going through the list, how do we work out? I use an app.
Yeah.
I literally use my phone for everything. So the fact that I didn't really put those 2 together really surprised me. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there is a space for this. And obviously our phones are not going away.
For sure. But do you think it's possible to get true community online?
That is a good question. I actually do think it's possible.
Why is that?
I don't know if it's the only way.
Yeah, I don't think. I think we just clarified. Yeah, I don't think it's the only way for sure.
I do think it's possible though. I think you can make a connection with someone over maybe a group of people over Zoom or video. I think that's completely possible. I don't know if I want to do it yet.
Why? Why?
Because I think there's so much to sitting next to a person and seeing their body language and hearing their voice and, oh my gosh, the cutting in and out of Zoom and unmuting yourself. There's only so much of that I can take. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I do think online community, I do think community can happen online. Right. I even think about our small group, right? We have been since the pandemic, and since we joined the group on meeting online, and we do gather in person, on a semi-regular basis as well. But we also every week meet online. And I've never actually walked away from that being like, man, I just don't connect with these people because it's happening on a screen.
Absolutely. And maybe it's different because we started our relationship with almost all of them in person.
Could be. Yeah. Could be. I read a really interesting article though, talking about there was a study. I believe it was the New York Times. I'll try and find it and put it in the show notes for those who want to maybe look it up after. But it was this study suggesting that actually people are more honest online than they are in person.
I absolutely believe that.
Right.
It's so easy to type, like especially typing. I think maybe not so much like in person or on video.
Mhm.
But I think typing, oh, absolutely. It's so easy to type something and send it off. You don't have to see their facial reaction.
Yeah, for sure. And I also just think too, one of the points of the study was saying that people are more honest online because in person, if I say something and then you're like a month later, you said this, I could be like, no, I didn't. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Whereas online, there's a paper trail.
Yeah.
I can go back and see what you actually said.
Yeah.
And so we're more honest because we don't want to be called out.
That totally makes
We don't want to be
sense.
exposed. Right. So I think there's something interesting about online that actually creates a space of honesty and vulnerability that is necessary for community, right? Because I mean, you don't get community, true community, without vulnerability. You just don't. You don't get it without honesty. And yet, for many people, online is a space where that's a little bit easier. I'd love to hear though stories of people who are finding community online. I mean, I hear stories all the time of people who find their spouse through a dating app. It all started digitally, and of course, it progressed into a physical in real life relationship. I hope, or be a little weird, but it started digitally.
Right.
And I think that's something to be said for the church that we should know is I've noticed is that for most people now, their relationship with a church starts digitally before it progresses physically.
That's
right.
Such a good point. I mean, we hear that all the time. Like, oh, I've been watching online for months. And we're like, oh, who are you?
Yeah.
It's nice to finally meet you in person. But that's so true. It starts online. And I mean, what an amazing way for people to dip their toe in the water and not feel pressured to talk to people in the lobby.
You can try it before you buy it,
Yeah.
right? Which is nice because I've walked into some churches and like 5 minutes in, I'm like, how do I get out of here? Where's the exit, right? Come on, if you can relate online, let us know in the comments. You know what I'm talking about. Unless you went to Canvas. If that was you at Canvas, please let me know. I feel very bad. But yeah, I think there is a change that's happening in the church, and that is that the lobby for the church used to be the church lobby of the church building. That was the first experience that someone would have in a church community. And I do believe there is still a church lobby. I just think the church lobby is no longer in a building, but it's actually in people's pockets. It's on their phone, right? Like it's on YouTube, it's on Instagram. Like that's the new lobby. We're checking you out. We're seeing what you're about. We're seeing if our values line up, all the questions you have coming into a new church. And so that means to me, at least, that technology and our presence online is so important because online community, it's here to stay. I want to look at one comment here that I thought was pretty interesting here. And again, from your grandma, but I thought it was a great point. She says, at my age and situation, I'm no longer able to go to church. So I thank God for the online church. I'm not sure there are many elderly in the same situation. I mean, I'm sure there are, but what a great example of just someone who can't go in person and is now able to be a part of the church community online because of that. So I'm so excited to see that. And then we had Eric. He said, this third point is the hardest for me. At some point, we have to come to terms with mourning traditional in-person church experiences to meet people where they really are.
Oh, man, that's so good, Eric. And I feel like I have a total heart connection with you with this.
That's what we say in our daughter's school. For those who have no idea what a heart connection is.
That's a heart connection.
We tap our chest like that.
With somebody say heart connection. That's so funny I said that. But I totally feel this because I grew up in the church. I went to church every Sunday, probably most Wednesday nights. So not being in person or feeling that threatened totally kind of freaks me out. But we have to meet people where you are, like you said, Eric. And you said this yesterday in your message. You said we have to use culture to reach culture.
Yeah.
Jesus went to where the people are. And if people are online, then we got to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we take Jesus seriously, then we have to take meeting people where they are seriously. And that is I think a value that goes beyond just technology. I mean, how we show up for our friends, how we show up for our enemies, how we show up for those who are struggling. When Jesus came to this earth, he didn't treat people like projects. He treated them like people. He showed up where they were. Like, I love that about Jesus, that he would always meet people in their lowest moments or meet people in their shame. And he would meet them in their struggle. He would meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And I think we as the church for a long time, and I'm probably guilty of this as well, but the church has sort of been, instead of saying we're going to meet you where you are, it is more come where we are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Come where we are and agree
Invite
with
your friends to this building.
Yeah. Which again, it's like, it's not to say that's necessarily bad, but what is our posture here? Like, is it just expecting people to come to us, or are we willing to go to people?
Absolutely.
One more thought here, and then we'll move on there from Eric. He said, I thought it was interesting when you said around 70%, it was 71% of baby boomers want in-person church primarily, but fewer younger generations think of church as fully in person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is interesting when you see that. So the stats were 71% of baby boomers wanted to return to in-person services primarily after the pandemic. 41% of Gen Z said they wanted to return primarily, and 42% of millennials said they want to return to in-person primarily. And it's not so much that they're saying we don't want to go to church or be a part of a church, but it is the idea that, hey, I don't need to go every week.
Right.
I don't need to go to be in person, to be connected every single week at this church. I can connect on YouTube or online or through the app or whatever.
Right.
And we see that all the time here at Canvas. Yeah. I mean, our attendance on Sunday will go from like 120 to, then there's like 70. And you're like, what in the world? At the beginning, it was frustrating, but then I came to realize this actually just normal. Aligns with the trend that this idea of hybrid church, that church in person, offline and online, is becoming more and more normal. So we can embrace it. And this is why we're doing even spaces like this, so that we can meet people where they are, and extend these conversations beyond the Sunday in-person service.
I do think that is actually really exciting, because I feel like we have this opportunity to help people's mindset shift from we are going to church to no, I am the church.
Yep.
I mean, the church needs to capitalize on that moment, from that mindset of going to a building to, nope, I am the church. I gather with them, but I am the church wherever I go. If I'm in Tahoe this weekend, I'm still the church in Tahoe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a different mindset, right? And maybe that's an exciting implication of this, is that instead of us, we're getting away from that, I'm going to church, and really embracing we're the church.
Yeah. Well, and
wherever we are.
Think of what could happen if people really took that and changed how they live based off just that phrase. Like, I am the church. I'm not going to church. I'm going to go see people in my community, but I am the church.
Yeah. If only that was like in the Bible or something. Right? If only that concept, man,
where's
they really
your
missed
sound
it.
Effect?
And
you didn't play with. Oh, not that one.
Oh, not that one. Okay. So, and then one more, and then we'll move on to takeaways. So Lydia Cruz put this, and I just want to put this because I think it's important now. It's worth reiterating. She said, that's why I think it's so important to build the bridge between in-person and online, not in-person or online. So true. It makes it a little less scary for those of us who love in-person. And you're really echoing what we said earlier. And that is, and I just want to be so clear with this, because I think a lot of times, especially if you were born and raised in the church, and especially you, if you were born and raised in the church and actually had a good church experience.
Also me.
I found people who were raised in the church with a good church experience, they flinch the hardest at this concept of online versus offline.
Yes.
Because or someone who started coming to church later in life and had a really good start. And good relationship with the church, like this idea of like that not being the primary thing, they get a little like,
but that's what I love. That's what
it was so good. Yeah. You it feels almost like, I would imagine, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like you're threatening something that was like a core part of your childhood.
Oh, absolutely. It is like one of your foundations. It feels like.
And I think it's so important. And to your point, Lydia, it's so important to remind everyone of this. The question is not either online or in person. It is online and in person. And I'll go even further, just for the sake of clarity. I've never met a person who would say that digital community is better than physical community.
Oh, right.
Never. Even people who champion that community can happen digitally, even those people, I've never heard anyone actually say, yeah, it's better than physical community. No, but it can be supplemental to your community, and it can be supplemental to your relationship to the church.
Yes.
It is not online or offline.
Right.
It is online with offline.
Yeah.
online with in person. It's
Right.
both. They can both work together, which you're seeing. And we're going to talk a bit about this more this next Sunday, but you're seeing this even in our own technology right now, that we are bridging this gap between the real and the virtual.
Very so weird.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a Meta, what is a Meta Oculus
yeah.
Quest thing,
Oh boy.
like you've experienced virtual reality, and Apple is rumored to be releasing their own glasses, AR, VR glasses in augmented reality and virtual reality, and it's bringing in the real with the digital, and I almost see it as a metaphor for where we're going.
Yeah.
It's bridging this gap of the two to create an immersive experience, digitally at least, that you couldn't have in one or the other, but you can experience in both. And I think when you actually bring digital with the personal and physical, when it comes to church, you actually, I would argue, maybe you create a more immersive experience in the community, because now it's not just a Sunday thing.
Yeah.
It's an everyday thing.
Well, and what an opportunity for the church to be creative.
Yeah.
And to think, we have to think differently. We have to try new things.
Totally.
As culture changes, we have to get creative. And it seems weird now, but what a cool way to do that.
This is an opportunity to be creative. I think you can be an early adopter at this point, and I love being an early adopter. You know this about me. I love being an early adopter, and that means sometimes you'll adopt some things early that don't actually pan out. But I would rather be an early adopter than a latecomer, right?
Yeah,
like I would rather adopt and try and experiment and innovate and see what happens. And I really believe, and I'm going to get excited here because I believe this so much, that is, the church has for so long been known as not a creative community, known as a community that's like 20 years behind. And I think that is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, I think the church should be known as like the epicenter of creativity and innovation. We should be on the front lines. We should not be afraid of it. We should be creating the future, and being a part of what God is doing in this world. I don't know. I'm just really passionate about that. And I do think this is a historic moment and shifting in culture that the church could step into. And we could be on the front lines of a new era. A moment that our kids and their kids will look back on and go like, man, remember when that happened?
Yeah.
Crazy.
And just reminding people, like, when we say the church, we're not talking about the leaders of the church.
No.
Every single person. Like, if you're sitting there on Sunday, you can be creative in this way.
Yeah.
And use technology to build community and point people to Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
Don't wait for the lead pastors to do something. You do it because you're the church.
Absolutely. I think that's where the church is going. I mean, I shared with our board recently stats about how people don't trust pastors very much.
Oh, man.
And remember when I shared that?
do, yeah.
And police officers and lawyers were trusted more than pastors.
Oh, that's so
crazy.
sad.
And that's not a knock on either of those professions. So don't
Yeah.
DM me and say I'm saying something. Like, I'm just saying, like,
That's the reality.
I even think used car salesmen were above pastors.
I want to say it was car salesman.
Yeah, I think it was used car. I'll have to find that and put it in the show notes as well. But the bottom line being that, like, the trust among pastors or clergy just is diminishing.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, I could get really upset about that, or I can see it as an opportunity, not to go out and try and prove myself or be insecure, but really like, okay, how do I empower people? Like, we are the church. I'm not the church. We are the church together. It's not about me. It's about we. Cool. Hey, let's go ahead. We're going to do another the 3 takeaways I talked about. So those are 3 trends. Let me give you 3 takeaways in light of those trends that I think, again, we as the people who are committed to building a future church worth passing on to the future generation, we should be mindful of these 3 takeaways. The first is this: the future church must show up as servants, not stakeholders.
Woo.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday. This may be a point that some people don't like. It can be confrontational in some rooms, but I'll say it nonetheless. The church for a long time has been acting like they have this sort of sacred alliance with the state, with this country. And we do not live in that. If that world existed, we do not live in that world anymore. And so we need to quit showing up like we are stakeholders of some sacred alliance, and we need to show up as servants to all people.
Ooh, yes.
Not just those that agree with us, not just those who vote like us or think like us or look like us or act like us. We need to show up as servants to all. Again, like Jesus. Number 2 takeaway is the future church must measure engagement over attendance. It's about engagement over attendance, not just butts in seats on Sundays,
Yeah.
but how do we actually get, how are we seeing people go from rows to relationships? Are they engaging in community? Are they engaging in the teachings and ways of Jesus? Are they engaging in their community? Are they engaging with kingdom work happening in their city, or are they engaging in justice-driven work in their city? We need to measure engagement, not just a Sunday attendance.
Yeah.
And then last takeaway is the future church must go from Sunday to every day. Since we are entering into a more normalized hybrid church model approach, or at least it seems that way, we need to go from Sunday to every day.
All day,
every day. So of those, what do you think? And then those listening, what are those takeaways stood out to you?
I think the last one again, the future church will need to go from Sunday to every day. Again, based on how I was raised, it was all about Sunday and Wednesday. And so really tapping into change and creativity and thinking, okay, how are we not just going to check a box one day a week, but how are we going to be the church every day? Which again comes back to, I think, such an exciting moment for us to really reclaim that we are the church. Yeah, so that's definitely the one that stood out to me. I mean, all three are great. I think the other one is showing up as servants. Humility, courage and humility is what you said yesterday. God above me and people before me. And especially with how the world is, especially our country, humility has to be at the forefront of our actions.
Yeah. Do you think if we took a poll nationwide and said, do you believe Christians are a humble community? Do you think that there would be like majority yes or majority no?
So sad to say no.
Right? Like, and maybe they would say yes. I don't know. But I kind of think the same thing. They probably say no.
Yeah. Well, and I think that ties back to a lot of what we keep hearing from people is they don't even want to tell people that they're a Christian in their workplaces. They don't want to use that word because they're worried that somebody's immediately associating them with something else.
Yeah.
And I feel like in order to change that, we have to lead with humility and love and serving people and just showing up and being there and being a good listener.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think those two really, stood out to me as well. Like measuring engagement over attendance, that makes a lot of sense to me. But these, number one, the showing up as servants, I think it is just mission critical. I think it's mission critical for Christians to show up with a selfless posture and with the heart of a servant. Again, to sort of say what I said earlier is like, I just don't know if we really take Jesus seriously if we don't take serving seriously. Jesus showed up to serve, and he had every right to flex, but he didn't. He had every right to come in and just tell us what's up, right? Because he's God. When you're God, you can do those sort of things. But instead, we're told in the scriptures that he actually like laid his power and privileges to the side and instead embraced the posture of a servant. And it's interesting because over the last, probably since 2016, and of course it didn't start then, but I feel like it's just been at the forefront of so much conversation is you're seeing so many Christians who are fighting for power, right? Fighting for power in this country. It's this sort of empire mindset.
Yeah. It's like they want it. We're going to play by their rules or they're taking their ball and going home.
Yeah. And it's weird though, right? Because you don't see Jesus do that. You don't look at scriptures like Jeremiah 29 when Israel is in, a pagan nation, doing atrocious and evil things in Babylon. And what does God say? God says, hey, put down roots, build your homes, grow your families, and flourish the city, for its welfare is your welfare. I mean, it really is in a lot of ways, the opposite of what I see from, unfortunately, some Christians where they're not living hey, your welfare is my welfare. It's get on my page or get out sort of thing. Right. And it's this, it seems like that Christians are a bit too concerned in America about losing power. Yeah. And I almost wonder, maybe it's good that we're losing power because we'll be forced to actually be Christians again.
It's going to force us to go back to what's most important.
Yeah. go back to what matters most. It's not about empire. It's not about status. It's not about building a political party or anything like that. It's not about making some human king. It's about letting Jesus be king and participating in an alternative community, creating an alternative way of life.
Right.
That models the way of Jesus. And I just think maybe it's a good thing. I'm going to say it again, because I just think maybe it's good that Christians are losing their power in America, because now Christians can start being Christians again. Like we can actually come back
That's good.
to what it means to follow Jesus. But I also think, going from Sunday to every day, this one excites me. The Sunday to every day. I'm excited about spaces like this, and how do we create opportunities outside of Sunday to connect with people, to serve people, to pray with people, to grow and do life with people.
Right.
Because I think that's something that gets forgotten in the book of Acts. We read the book of Acts and we see at one point where it says that God added to their number daily.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear churches and pastors quote that all the time. And they're like, God, add to our number daily. And they pray that. And that's great. I'm all about it. Like, I want to see growth too. But they don't mention the verse before that literally says, and they spent every day together in the temple. Like, they were constantly engaged with one another in the temple. And in most churches, I mean, if we're honest, they spend all their time on 1 hour of the week,
right,
while forgetting the other 167 hours of the week.
Yeah.
So we give people like a holy punch in the arm on Sunday, but Monday is coming.
Yeah.
And Monday's hard.
Yeah. And Monday is when people need their community to show up for them.
Yep.
To bring them a meal, to have a shoulder to cry on, to know somebody's praying for them. That's the day. That's the day they need people to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, a church that meets you in the everyday. I just think that's an exciting concept and question. How do we do that? And which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to experiment a little bit. How do we walk together as a church regularly, create community and connection on a regular, on a regular basis?
And
because
not just
I
give
need it.
people a list to do, but just empowering them to start thinking of this for
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
You are, again, we keep going back to this, but you are the church. How are you going to show up for your community this week?
And maybe that is something that God is doing in us right now. Is like, maybe before you can actually go and build the church, you've got to understand that you are the church.
Yeah.
Like, you are the brick and mortar.
Yeah.
God is not building buildings. God is building people. We are the church. And maybe that's just something we have to own.
Mhm.
We have to really own.
Yeah.
If we're going to build a future church that's worth passing on to the future generation. Because if you don't think that you're the church, I wonder if you'll always think it's someone else's responsibility to step up and to lean in and to move this thing forward. But when we go, no, we are the church.
Mhm.
And now there's this ownership. You've got skin in the game, and now you got to push it forward.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, Jenna. Like, I just think we keep coming back to that for a reason. And maybe those of us who are listening right now, you can ask your question. Are you living as the church? Are you living as the church? Do you really see that as a follower of Jesus? And that's really who I'm talking to here. Like, if you're a follower of Jesus, do you see part of your identity as, I am the brick and mortar in the church that God is building in this world? And what does that mean for your life? What does it mean to live like someone who believes they actually are the church? Maybe some of us need to stop going to church and we just need to be the church, right? Man, that's good. Let's go ahead and look at some of these questions here or thoughts. Awesome. Thank you, Eric. You buy a car from me. I appreciate that. I'm glad at least one person trusts me more than a used car salesman. I really appreciate that. That is awesome. So here's what Lydia said. She said, it was powerful when you spoke about how the world should see your faith, not just hear you talk about it. They should see how we treat others, not hear soapbox speech about how to treat others. Yeah.
And I feel like it's so easy, especially right now, for us to be like, oh, the church is just on their soapbox.
Totally. But it's just so easy to like, and this is where I think maybe digital backfires a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially like social media. There's some really good things about it, but it does seem like social media can be turned into a soapbox. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, it's really not about actually going and doing the thing you say you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Because, hey, if you just shared it, on social, if you reshared it or whatever, like then you must care, obviously. Like it's very performative. That's what I should have said. Yeah.
And I think it's easy to do it without knowing sometimes because
totally.
of Instagram. You know, when we go and serve and we post it all over Instagram.
Oh, I felt that. I mean, I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but there are times, especially, you know, in really confrontational or difficult times culturally, especially over the last few years, when you had the murder of George Floyd, and then you had the protests, and then you had the riot at the Capitol, the insurrection at the Capitol, and I mean, Instagram and social media was exploding, and there was a part of me that almost I was like, am I saying enough?
Yeah.
Am I tweeting enough? Am I making enough of a statement? And I found this temptation to be like, okay, I'm just going to post this.
Right.
So that I'm saying something. Like, I don't know if that's okay to say, but like, I felt that.
Yeah.
I felt that tension. And I really had to like pause and evaluate, like, is this performative, or is this coming from a true place of conviction?
Right.
You know, and I don't know. It's just easy, especially with social media, to talk it, but not walk it.
Right.
You know, and so I agree, Lydia. I mean, I said it, so hopefully I agree. But like, you know, I definitely think the greatest evidence of our beliefs aren't in our statements, but it's seen in our lives.
Right.
The greatest evidence of our truest beliefs are seen in what you do, not what you say. I heard one pastor say, you do what you actually believe. What you actually believe, you will do. Yeah. Right. So if I say I believe this, but I don't do it, you don't really believe it. You don't believe it.
Yeah.
But if you say you believe this and you do it, it's proven true.
Right.
Through how you live your life.
Absolutely.
And that's something for us as followers of Jesus to just sit on, you know, like, and I mentioned, you know, yesterday where, you know, you had Roe v. Wade and you had that judgment come down. And again, social media went berserk, and Christians in particular had, you know, a variety of responses. But, you know, I saw a lot of people talking about how pro-life they are. And like, I mean, to each, you can go on social media and do that. But like, you know, what's really powerful is if you're pro-life, that you go and actually care for all life, from womb to tomb, the woman, the child, and every human, right? Like pro-life, you don't get to be selected. You're either pro-life of all life or you're not pro-life, right? And so, so I do think, you know, there's this point where we got to quit talking about it. We got to go and be about it.
Right.
We got to go and show up in the world and actually show what we believe by what we do.
Yeah. Again, being the church.
Be the church. Come on.
Be the church.
Maybe that's what we titled this episode. Be the freaking church. Or be the church. Be the church. Okay, we'll just be the church. So, hey, you know, we only got a couple minutes left here, but I would love to hear any questions or thoughts that maybe you have. Let us know in the comments to those who are watching right now. If you watch this later on, let us know in the comments. I'd love to respond to those on YouTube, and Jenna might as well. And we'd love to continue the conversation beyond this live recording.
I would actually encourage you, like, don't let it stop when this recording ends.
Yeah.
Go and talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, totally.
This should spur more conversations, not put a period at the end of the sentence.
Absolutely.
It should be a comma.
Absolutely. But I would love to, you know, anybody else have questions, let us know in the chat. But Jenna, any thoughts or questions you've been wrestling with as you know, we've been marinating on this and thinking through this?
Yeah, I think I just keep going back and forth from kind of bummed out about the church to being really hopeful.
Yeah.
It's a very weird mix of emotions when you face the reality of what's happening, but then also really hopeful when you realize this is such an opportunity. Like, we cannot let this moment pass us by. We must step into the change that the Holy Spirit is leading us towards, because if we do, I truly believe something amazing is going to happen. I don't know what it will look like. But I feel like it is hopeful in the midst of some really sad statistics.
Yeah. And I think grief has a place in this process, you know, especially if you were like you, raised in the church, a good experience in the church. You didn't walk out of it with trauma or anything like that. Like, so there's this level of grief to find out maybe your changing. Experience wasn't everybody's experience.
Absolutely.
And that the way forward probably looks different
than
the past.
And that's okay. I'll still like my low lit buildings with fog machines.
You like fog machines?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
know, it
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
cool.
No, but totally. I mean, I
But
do think there's a
change is
place for
okay.
grief. Grief has a place in the process. But then there is that point where we go, okay, we gotta stop grieving and we got to start going.
Mhm.
You know,
And
we got to start moving forward.
if it reaches more people with the love of Jesus, that is the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Again, it's like, I mean, what are we doing here?
Mhm.
Are we just
It's not
trying
about
to
me.
protect our programs? Or are we actually trying to serve people?
Yeah.
Are we actually trying to um to move this thing forward and create a future worth fighting for and worth
Right.
passing on to the next generation?
Yeah.
Or like, do we just kind of want to protect our thing?
Right.
And I think that's a question we really have to ask as we feel threatened, as we feel sort of some cognitive dissonance happen when we talk about, you know, what's wrong with the church and where we're going in the church and all that, where you kind of go, what's really happening here?
Right.
What's really going on? Because yeah, it's probably going to press buttons on a lot of levels,
Absolutely.
depending on your experience,
Yeah.
you know, with the church. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
So somebody listening to this right now who maybe would not say they are a follower of Jesus,
Mhm.
and they're like, wow, future church, what would you say to somebody who's listening right now who has no experience? They are not a follower of Jesus, but they're listening to something about the future church. What would you want them to know?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
This is not in our notes.
Yeah, no, I think I would really want somebody who's not a follower of Jesus, who's maybe listening to this conversation. I guess I'll just go with the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
The first thing I would want to say is your voice at the table really matters. Like I think that's the thing I would want them to know is like your voice matters.
Yeah.
We need to hear what you're hearing. We need to see what you're seeing. We want to learn from your experiences.
Yeah.
And for those that are sitting here aren't a follower of Jesus because they've experienced church trauma and or they've just been so discouraged with the church, you know, I would just want to say, you know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I would love to just continue to walk with you and navigate life with you and hear more of your story and learn from it. Because I think, you know, your perspective is powerful and your perspective is needed if we're going to do better as a church. So I guess that's what I would say. I don't know if that's the right answer. There's probably a lot smarter people who have better answers than that, but I that's probably what I would say.
Love that.
That's what I would say.
Your voice matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and look on here. All right, Eric, he said this. Any ideas on how to create a sacred digital space? Any ideas on how to create a sacred digital space? I guess for me, the first question that would come to mind is, I mean, I don't know, like, what do you mean by sacred? I guess, you know, because I guess from my viewpoint, we live in a world where there's the sacred secular. And if you've been living in the church, there's Christian music, then there's non-Christian music. And there's like this compartmentalization that happens. But like in the world of Jesus, everything was sacred. Like everything had sort of sacred implications to it.
I think creating any sacred space really does start with humility and love.
Yeah.
Whether you're in person or digital, I feel like you have to start there.
Start there and start with, you know, how do you create a sacred digital space in particular? It's like create a space where people can love God and love one another. I mean, really, at the end of the day, Jesus said, do those two things and everything else will fall into place. And so I guess that would be what I would say is like, maybe we overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Like we think it has to, I know I'm guilty of this, even trying to get this podcast set up. I was like, it's gotta be perfect. It's gotta be awesome. Like, and I think sometimes we get really caught up in entertainment culture. That I think we just need to remember, what does a sacred digital space look like? Honestly, you want a really easy one? Text a friend right now and say, I'm thinking about you. I care about you.
And I'm here.
And I just want you to know, like, I love you and God loves you. You just created a sacred digital space.
That sounds like a good,
right? Like that's a for Monday for
good
somebody.
for Monday.
Like sacred digital space is any digital space where you bring the love of God into there and invite other people to be a part of it, you know? And so maybe it doesn't have to be complicated, I guess is what I would say, Eric, is, you know, create digital space wherever you go, because you're engaging with digital space all of the time.
Yeah.
You know, next Zoom meeting, before everyone jumps into business, start and say, hey, how's everyone doing today? I'm just thinking about y'all. Can I help you at all? You know, like, again, like it doesn't need to be complicated.
Yeah.
Just show up like Jesus would. I've been wrestling with this question. Do you think Jesus would have a TikTok?
I love that you just asked that.
Yeah.
I would never have thought of that question.
Yeah, I think if Jesus, I was thinking about that a lot this week. It was like, if Jesus lived in 2022, going to 2023, would Jesus have a TikTok? And what would Jesus do? I think Jesus would for sure dance. He would be the dancing pointing, where you point and the words pop up.
Oh, no, he would
He'd be like, love God, love people.
No, I can't get on board with that idea.
My Jesus dances on TikTok. You can quote me on that. But no, I asked that question in the light of Eric's question. Is maybe that's a good place. Like, if Jesus had your Instagram, what would Jesus do with it?
I think that is a great question.
Or
TikTok, honestly.
Or TikTok, or Facebook, or YouTube,
or
or MySpace, whatever you're using, right? Or what'd you say?
Yelp.
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
How would he review that restaurant?
How would Jesus review that restaurant? No, but I mean, honestly, it sounds like a weird question, but if Jesus had your TikTok, what would Jesus do with it? I don't think that's actually an unreasonable question. It might be a good question before the question of like, how do I create a digital space? First, let's ask, what would Jesus do if he had your Instagram?
Yeah.
And some of you are like, I don't have platform. I don't have like 100,000 followers or what. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Like, Jesus left the 99 sheep for the one, or he told the story of leaving the 99 sheep for the one. He's like, this is what God is like.
Yeah.
So if you have one follower, then you have enough.
Yeah.
You have enough. You have enough of a platform, according to Jesus, at least, because every person counts.
Yep, that's right.
And every experience matters. So would Jesus have TikTok? I guess, did you answer the question? Do you think he would?
Oh, God.
If he had to choose between TikTok and Instagram, which one do you think Jesus would pick?
Absolutely be on Instagram. This is not even a question.
Okay. Well, let us know in the comments what you think. Would Jesus have a TikTok or an Instagram? And let us know in the comments, and we'll be sure to respond to that later. Hey, we want to give you a For Monday as we wrap up. We want to end these For Mondays with a For Monday. So here's what I want to invite you into this next week. And you may have been inspired by something else, and you're like, I already got my For Monday. Great. But here's something else to add on to that. What is one way that you can show up as a servant and nudge the future church forward this week?
That's so good. Show up as a servant.
How can you show up as a servant this week? Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. Show up in small ways and big ways and everything in between. Show up as a servant and nudge. And I use that word nudge intentionally, like nudge the future church forward. I think we got to understand this is going to take time.
Yeah.
Got to have patience. And we got to nudge it forward every single day.
One way.
Remember, you are the
church.
Come on, somebody.
Love it.
We weren't planning that theme to come to the service, but it did. Yeah. You are the church. You are the church. What about your life would change if you lived like that was true? Yeah. I am the church. Chances are, if you believe that you were the church, you would show up as the biggest servant in your workplace, in your family, with your friends, with your enemies. You would show up as the biggest servant. And as a result, I believe you would nudge the future church forward.
So good.
I think it's been good. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you've enjoyed this, let us know in a comment. Like this, share this, subscribe to this, and be a part of this new space called the For Monday podcast.
So exciting. We get to do it again in a week.
Come on, somebody. Wow. I had to do it one more time.
You didn't do that many times. I'm pretty excited.
I didn't want to become distracting.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we're signing off. Everybody, you are awesome. Until next week, have a great one. Let's go be the church.